Welcome to Coffee Theology, where no question is off the table. In this series, we're going to be dealing with the problem of evil. We're going to be looking at how did Satan fall and how did man fall? Why did God allow that? What is the result of sin and what is this? Why is there death? And what's this thing called hell? But before we get into those subjects, we're first going to ask the very basic question that underlies it all, which is, if God is good, why does he allow evil to exist? Now, this is a legitimate question. If God is all-powerful and almighty, and he's good, and he hates evil, and there's nothing impossible for him, why didn't he create a world that had no evil in it? Well, another way to ask the same question is to say, why didn't God create a perfect world? That's really what we're wanting. And the answer to that question is, he did. God did create a perfect world, but he's not done creating it yet. There's a plan that God has had from the very beginning. It is a plan to bring about this perfect world. And it's what Jesus is referring to in Matthew 25:34, when he says, "Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world.'" Now, in this passage, kingdom basically equals perfect world. Now, what's important to grasp here is that this kingdom, this future kingdom when Christ returns, that is the world that God is in the process yet of creating. A lot of times we think that back in Genesis, he finished and it was all done and it was good and it was good. And then when sin came in, it screwed up the whole plan. And now we're on to plan B. Now, God did finish the creation and say it was all good. But everything that happened after that until the time of Christ's return is still part of his plan, and he knew that it would occur. It's part of how he is shaping the human race to be perfect, because he wanted to have a free human race that would love him forever, freely so, and would be perfect, and he would put that perfect human race then in a perfect world. That is what is being referred to by Paul in Romans 8, verses 18 to 21, when he says, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing to the glory that is to be revealed in us." Now, it's important here to note that it is in us. Some versions will say revealed to us, but the original language clearly makes it in us, and it fits the context, because the glory that is going to be revealed is what God does in us to make us perfect and prepare us to be capable of inheriting a perfect world. Now, Paul goes on and he says, "For the creation waits the eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God." That's us coming out as that perfect race. "For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God." We'll unpack that a little bit later in this video. "For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. And not only the creation, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoption as sons." Now, what this is basically bringing out is that we are in the pregnancy stage of human history. It's a great picture. When God created the world, that was the conception of the human race. But there is a process that the human race is going through, and the creation is going through, and it's awaiting this birthing of the final human race that will be perfect. And the fall, sin, and what we call evil is all a part of that process in the wisdom of God that helps produce in us that perfection where we love him forever. And in this way, evil is something that is only going to really exist during this age and this stage of history. So we ask, why didn't God create a perfect world? Why not? He did. He's in the process of doing it, and the existence of evil right now is part of what shapes us so that we can have that perfect world in the end. Well, why did God allow this evil right now? And probably the bigger question is what is evil? Now, in today's postmodern sense, different people have different ideas of what evil is and what good is. And when we get into the fall of man, we're going to cover that more deeply as to why that is the case, that we all have our own sense of good and evil. I mean, what I think is evil might be totally different than what somebody else thinks is evil. But quite seriously, the question needs to be asked, just what is evil? Well, a great illustration, I think, is similar to that of darkness. Darkness is sometimes said not to be something, but the absence of something. Darkness is the absence of light. Light is something. What it is, whether it's wave or particle, that will make for an interesting video later on. But light is something, but darkness is just the absence of it. Similarly, evil is really kind of the absence of good. And it's understand that as we fall and as we struggle with God, the evil that is there is produced by us, but it is also because of God removing His blessing. And so it's that absence of what could be and what we someday will have that makes what is now here a world that has evil in it. Now, in order to say that evil is the absence of good, you have to then define, well, what is good? Well, good is loving God. Now, Jesus makes plain when He is teaching that the sum of the whole law is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. And that is the heart of what is good. And loving God is completely appropriate. He created us. He made us. He is the one that provides for us and gives us breath. All of this world around us is held together by Him, and in turning and loving Him is completely natural. Now, some people may say, well, I've gone through this painful situation and I've had this horrible loss and life was really cruddy for me, and so I can't believe in that God and I can't stand that God, and so for Him to ask me to love Him is just too selfish on His part. Now, part of the thing that we're getting to at in this video is really a lot of those things that we're putting on God's plate and blaming Him for that leads us to that place. When we understand what's going on, we realize that's actually more the result of humans and what we have done to this creation. That aside, God is the creator and the one who made us and who gives us all these things, and loving Him is completely appropriate, and it's what He wanted from us when He created us. God's desire was to have a race that loved Him intensely. Now, the thing about that is that love requires freedom. If I'm going to love God and He just pre-programmed me to love Him, it means less. If I created artificial intelligence and I had this robot and I programmed it to be my friend because for some reason I couldn't make friends, don't know why that would be the case, but if I can't make friends and I make this robot and I program it so that it says, Dwayne, you're awesome. Dwayne, you're so good looking. Dwayne, you're so smart. Dwayne, you're the best teacher. You're the best husband. You're the best dad. You're great. You're awesome. But that robot has no choice but to say those things because I programmed it to say it. That doesn't really feel very great. That's it's just me being vain and full of myself, and I just created something to say that back. However, if I created that robot and it had a choice whether to say it, and I actually had to, in a sense, almost earn that or show that I was worthy of it, then when that robot came back and said that it loved me, it could mean something. Well, this is the exact freedom that God granted us. We're not robots, but we are his creation, and he created us so that we could love him in response and be genuine, and we were free to do that. Now, he gave us that freedom, but that freedom then allows for us to turn our backs on God and fail to love him. Now, evil then refers to the bad things that are happening on account of our failure in the human race to love God. Now, there's a great caution here, because I don't want to say that, oh, well, when you get cancer, it's because there was some sin in your life. When you lost a child, it's because you chose not to love God and God came and punished you. That's not what's being put out here. When I say that evil is due to our failure, is that the creation itself, everything around us, is affected by our choice to turn our backs on God. When the human race chose to turn our backs on God, God took back his hands of blessing and could not step in and intervene in the many ways we cry out for him to help. Now, he does at times to reveal things, but because of our turning our backs on him, he allows us. It's like, the kid that tells the parents, get out of here. I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear that. And so the parents are like out, and then they wonder, well, why wasn't the parent there to help me? It's because you told them to get out. And we've done that to God. And so when God removes his blessing, there are evils in this life that aren't directly related specifically to a sin, but they are the result of humanity's choice to turn their back on God. As we'll see in a video eventually, as I cover things like creation and evolution and the fall and the flood, when we get to the flood, the world was perfect and beautiful, but the flood made it so that the world was now disrupted and there could be natural disasters. The stance that I have, that will be unpacked at a different time, is that prior to the flood, there were no earthquakes. There were no storms, no hurricanes, no volcanoes, no famines, no droughts. Those things didn't exist at the time of creation. But after the flood, which God did as a result of humanity's sin at that time, then the world became disrupted and subjected to all of this trouble that we now have, and we are continuing to have. So evil, even the bad things and the tragedies, all of those bad things that are going on, they are part of the consequence of our stewardship over the creation as humans and our failing to love God and asking God to get out, and then consequences to those things. So everything in life that is evil does come back to us in our choice not to love God. Now, when God created the world and it resulted in this situation, it was not a failure for God. So for God, he expected it, he knew it was coming, and in fact, in his wisdom, he knew exactly how to use it to achieve the ends that he wanted. Now, when this evil occurred, it opened the door for God to show us just how merciful and patient that he can be, to demonstrate that to us. See, God, in allowing us to fall, in allowing us to get into that sin, it opened up the opportunity for forgiving and for his mercy to be shown. Why is that important? Well, there's this little passage within the Gospel of Luke that I feel gives a key to this, though we may not always pick up on it. So in Luke 7, verses 36 to 47, he says, one of the Pharisees asked him to eat with him, and he went into the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. And behold, a woman of the city who was a sinner, when she learned that he was reclining at the table in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster flask of ointment, and standing behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears, and wiped them with her hair, the hair of her head, and kissed his feet, and anointed them with ointment. Now when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would have known who and what sort of woman this is who is touching him, for she is a sinner. And Jesus answering said to him, Simon, I have something to say to you. And he answered, say it, teacher. And he said, a certain moneylender had 2 debtors. One owed 500 denarii and the other 50. When they could not pay, he canceled the debt of both. Now, which of them will love him more? Simon answered, the one, I suppose, for whom he canceled the larger debt. And he said to him, you have judged rightly. Then turning toward the woman, he said to Simon, do you see this woman? I entered your house, and you gave me no water for my feet. But she has wet my feet with her tears, and wiped them with her hair. You gave me no kiss. But from the time I came in, she has not ceased to kiss my feet. You did not anoint my head with oil, but she has anointed my feet with ointment. Therefore I tell you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. But he who is forgiven little loves little. Now, something that's important to get from this is when he says, therefore I tell you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. He is not saying that she's forgiven because she loved much. He's not saying that now that she loved all this and did all these things, then that attained to her being forgiven. So I'm going to forgive her now because she did all that stuff. That's not what he's saying. He says at the end, he who is forgiven little loves little, which the opposite then is he who is forgiven much loves much. She poured out her love to Christ in those ways because she was already forgiven. Because the deep, deep forgiveness that she received stirred up the love in her so that she did those things. Now, when we understand this, it helps us realize that in this portion of history, God's primary goal is not to lay down the law and get us to follow it perfectly. But instead, during this time period, we are to grasp how sinful we are so that we know how much we have been forgiven, so that we respond to that forgiveness with intense love like this woman did. So it's not about performance. It's about repentance. It's about recognizing that. And you see, this is the thing. How do you get a free will creature to love you in response? Well, just that. It has to be a response. A response to what? To mercy, to love, to forgiveness. God understood that by allowing evil to enter in through our turning our backs on him, by allowing the world to go that direction and to have all these bad things to come in, it would give him the opportunity to show us just how merciful he is, just how loving he is. And he did that so that in the end, when we are made perfect, we would remember that and love him forever and never fall again. Now, in order for him to do that and to accomplish that, there was actually an important part that we actually see the wrath of God and we see the evil that is there so that we can appreciate what we have when we attain it in the end. If a parent were to constantly threaten their child and say, if you don't stop doing that, I'm going to ground you. I'm going to take your money away. I'm going to do all this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And the child just kept doing it. But then he's like, oh, I'm just going to forgive you. And then never, ever shows the actual punishment. And then says to the child, well, you should be thankful that I didn't do that. It's going to be very hard for that child to be grateful that they didn't get punished because the punishment to them was hypothetical. They never saw it. And this is why Paul brings out in Romans 9:22-24 a very important point. So what he says is, what if God, desiring to show his wrath and to make known his power, has endured with much patience vessels of wrath prepared for destruction, in order to make known the riches of his glory for the vessels of mercy, which he has prepared beforehand for glory, even us, whom he has called, not from the Jews only, but also from the Gentiles. Now, what Paul is saying here is that you and I, if we are redeemed, when we get to heaven, we will have seen that God poured his wrath out on all of the evil that was done in this world. Now, why not everybody gets to be redeemed and why some don't choose God, that's going to be a video for another time. I know it would be helpful maybe for me to unpack that right now, but way too long of a video already. Let it suffice to say that why God allowed the evil was because it allows him to show his wrath, his judgment, and his power and the punishment that he has on the evil. And then it lets those who are the objects of his mercy observe that, know what they deserved. I mean, the people who end up going into the kingdom in the end, they're not going to be sitting there going, ha, 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 look at those people. They were bad, and that's why they're getting all that stuff. Oh, no, that's not what it's going to be at all. Everybody who goes into the kingdom is going to be watching and seeing God's wrath poured out fully and completely aware that they deserve that much and maybe even more. But because of God's mercy, they've been forgiven. And that forgiveness then makes them love God forever and never turn away in eternity in that perfect world that we eventually have. So what we see then is that the evil that flowed from our freedom afforded God the opportunity to make himself known at a far deeper level than if we were not free in the first place. So he allowed the evil to come in. He allowed it to happen. He allowed the fall to occur because in his wisdom he knew how he would use it to then stir up in us a love for the forgiveness and the mercy that we received. Now, this is why we will go back and we'll look here at what Paul said in Romans 8:18 to 21, but this highlighted part especially. So it says, "For the creation was subjected to the futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God." Now, what Paul is saying here is that even the evil that occurs within the creation through natural disasters and all of the things around us that like cancer and all of those things, those will be wiped away in the future and they will be set free when we are set free and we all attain to that perfect world. So why didn't God create a perfect world? He did. He's just still in the process of doing it, and he will eventually attain to it. And evil is really the things that are happening in this world that help accomplish his purposes in shaping those of us who will be redeemed in the end. Now, we're going to have a number of other videos in this series, and hopefully they'll answer a lot of questions that may have been raised in this video. But please ask your questions in the comments below so that it can maybe shape what videos we might do. We may add some to the series because of that. To give you an idea, we're going to be dealing with the fall of Satan, the fall of man, what is sin, and why is there death, why is there hell, and going on to a number of other topics as well. But again, put comments down below what questions you have as a result, because we'll just create more videos to address those. I know that this video probably raised more questions than it answered. But also be sure to subscribe and push that little notifications thing so that you can know when the videos come out that are answering those questions. So glad to have you. You guys have a great time. Look forward to seeing you in the next video.